Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the new Green Lantern protecting Earth. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world had ended at 5:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. It hadn't ended with a bang, or a villain's cackle, or a city-leveling explosion. It had ended quietly, on a sun-drenched rooftop, with 3 words from the man Izuku Midoriya admired most in the entire universe. No, I don't think so. The words were still ringing in his ears, a dissonant funeral bell tolling for a dream he'd held for 10 agonizing, quirkless years. They echoed with every scuff of his worn red sneakers against the pavement, every weary sigh of the evening traffic, every cheerful, oblivious laugh from the people passing him by. They were parasites, burrowing into his brain and feasting on the last vestiges of his hope. Izuku's shoulders were slumped so low they ached, a physical manifestation of the crushing weight that had settled upon his soul. His hand was clenched tight around the strap of his yellow backpack, the knuckles white. Inside, he could feel the faint, crinkled ruin of his hero analysis for the future, number 13. It was no longer just singed. It was waterlogged now, too, soaked by the putrid sludge of the villain he'd so foolishly tried to save Kaken from. And then, as a final insult, it had been signed by All Might, a gesture that felt less like a gift and more like a beautifully calligraphed tombstone. Be realistic. The phrase followed him down the street, whispered by the wind that rustled the leaves of the ginkgo trees. He could still see the steam pouring from All Might's skeletal form, the pained, pitying look in his hollowed eyes. He'd shown Izuku his most vulnerable secret, a wound that was a metaphor for the hero world itself, glorious and shining on the outside, but decaying from within. And in that moment of shared vulnerability, he had taken Izuku's fragile, glass-blown dream and let it fall to the concrete. It wasn't that All Might had been cruel. That was the worst part. He had been kind. He had been logical. He had been realistic. A pro-hero's job was to risk their life. Without a quirk, Izuku wouldn't just be risking his own life. He would be a liability, a piece of baggage someone else would have to save. He would get in the way. He would get people killed. The logic was sound. It was irrefutable. And it was killing him. He trudged past the storefront with a dozen televisions in the window, all of them replaying the footage of the sludge villain incident. There was Kaken, explosions crackling in his hands, defiant and furious even as he was being suffocated. And there, a blurry, pathetic streak of green and black, Izuku himself, flinging his backpack in a useless gesture, scrabbling desperately at the slime. The news anchors weren't calling him brave. They were calling him reckless, foolish. They were right. His body had moved on its own, yes, but what good was an instinct for self-destruction? He saw his own face on the screen for a moment, a freeze frame of tear-streaked, terrified desperation. A quirkless nobody, trying to do a job meant for gods. The shame was a hot flush that crawled up his neck, and he quickened his pace, pulling the hood of his Gakuren over his head as if he could hide from his own public humiliation. He wanted to go home. He wanted to curl up in his All Might-themed bedroom, a room that now felt like a shrine to a lie, and never come out. But his feet, moving with a will of their own, weren't taking him home. They were leading him on a meandering, aimless path through the quieter, older parts of Muzidafu, as if his subconscious was trying to delay the inevitable moment when he would have to face his mother and tell her that her unwavering belief in him had been misplaced. How could he look her in the eye and tell her, "You were wrong, Mom. I can't be a hero." The thought brought a fresh wave of tears to his eyes, hot and stinging. He ducked into a narrow alleyway, pressing his back against the cool brick, and finally let the sobs rack his body. They were silent, desperate things, his throat too tight to make a sound. His body shook with the force of his grief, the grief for a future that would never be. All the years of notebooks, of frantic muttering and analysis, of late-night study sessions, of enduring Kaken's taunts and the pitying looks from his teachers, all for nothing. It was all just the pathetic rambling of a delusional child. "Why?" he whispered to the empty alley, his voice cracking. "Why couldn't I just have something? Anything?" The universe, as always, offered no reply. After a few minutes, the storm of tears subsided, leaving behind a profound, desolate emptiness. He felt hollowed out, a walking shell. He pushed himself off the wall and continued his trek, his destination still unknown. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange, pink, and violet. It was beautiful, and Izuku hated it. The world had no right to be so beautiful when his own had just collapsed into ash. He found himself walking along the coast, the scent of salt and brine filling the air. He knew where he was. His feet had led him here, to this monument of failure. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It wasn't a park, not anymore. It was a mountain range of forgotten things, a sprawling, illegal junkyard where the tide washed up the city's refuse and society dumped the rest. Broken refrigerators, rusted car chassis, mountains of plastic bags, and mangled appliances were piled high, creating a jagged, metallic skyline against the vibrant sunset. For years, All Might had been secretly cleaning this beach as part of his training regimen, a fact Izuku knew from his obsessive hero stalking. But his progress was slow, and the beach remained a testament to decay. It was fitting. This was where dreams came to die and be forgotten. Just like his. Izuku walked onto the sand, his red shoes sinking into the grit. He climbed a small hill of discarded electronics, the crunch of broken plastic and glass under his feet the only sound besides the gentle lapping of the waves. He sat down on a moldy, discarded sofa, its springs groaning in protest, and stared out at the ocean. This was it. The end of the line. Maybe he could be a police officer, like All Might had suggested. He could still help people. He could file paperwork, direct traffic, and call for a real hero when trouble started. The thought was so bleak, so utterly devoid of the vibrant, primary-colored dream he cherished, that it felt like swallowing dust. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the ruined notebook. He stared at the bubbly, confident signature of All Might stark and proud against the water-damaged, scorched paper. With a choked sob, he raised his arm, his fingers uncurling. He was going to throw it. He was going to hurl this last, mocking piece of his childhood into the sea and let it be swallowed by the tide. Another piece of forgotten trash on the shores of Dagoba. His arm tensed. His fingers loosened. Wait. It was not a thought, but a sound. A low, rising hum that vibrated in his teeth, making the hairs on his arms stand up. It was a sound that didn't belong here, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to be coming from the sky itself. He looked up. The sky was darkening, the first stars beginning to prick the deep indigo canvas. But among them, one star was moving. No, not a star. It was too bright, too fast. It was a meteor, maybe, but it wasn't white or yellow. It was green. An impossible, piercing, emerald green. It streaked across the sky, growing larger and brighter with every passing second. The low hum escalated into a high-pitched, terrifying shriek, the sound of tortured metal and superheated air. People on the distant boardwalk were pointing, shouting. Some were pulling out their phones, assuming it was a hero's dramatic entrance, or a villain's new attack. Izuku knew it was neither. This felt different. Alien. The green light was so intense it hurt his eyes, painting the entire junkyard in an unearthly viridescence. The rusted metal heaps gleamed with a sickly green sheen, the shadows stretching long and strange. He should run. Every sane instinct screamed at him to get away, to find cover. This was an impact event. Whatever it was going to hit, and it was going to hit close. But his legs were frozen. His hero notebook was still clutched in his hand. And a different part of him, the part that had thrown him at the sludge villain, the part that All Might had just told him to suppress, was wide awake. It wasn't screaming at him to run. It was whispering, what if someone's in there? What if they need help? The thought was insane. He was quirkless. He was useless. He was a liability. He had just accepted this. The object screamed past overhead, so close he could feel the heat wash over him. It was a teardrop shape of blinding green fire. It slammed into a massive pile of junk on the far side of the beach, a quarter-mile away, with a deafening, cataclysmic crash. Boom! The ground bucked beneath him. The sofa he was sitting on was thrown sideways, and Izuku tumbled down the small hill of trash, landing hard on the sand. A shower of dirt, sand, and small metal fragments rained down around him. The sound of the impact was followed by a symphony of destruction, the groaning tear of massive metal plates, the shattering of 1,000 panes of glass, the roar of a displaced mountain of garbage collapsing in on itself. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the ringing in Izuku's ears. Then, a plume of black smoke and steam began to rise from the impact site, glowing with that same eerie green light from within. He stayed on the ground, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Run. Get away. Call the police. Call a hero. Do something realistic. But his eyes were fixed on the column of smoke. What if it was a person? A civilian caught in a villain's ship crash? An experimental vehicle gone wrong? The pro-heroes would be on their way, surely, but every second could count. He got to his feet, his body trembling, not just from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline he hadn't felt since he'd been running at that wall of slime. He looked down at the notebook in his hand, at All Might's signature. I'm sorry, All Might, he thought, his resolve hardening into something brittle but sharp. I can't. I just can't. He wasn't running away from the danger. He was running towards it. Again. The closer he got to the crash site, the more surreal the scene became. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, burnt plastic, and something else, something metallic and organic and utterly foreign. The green glow pulsed from the heart of the wreckage, casting long, dancing shadows that made the junk piles look like monstrous, slumbering beasts. Izuku scrambled over a barrier of crushed cars, his hands and knees getting scraped on the jagged metal. The wreckage was centered in a newly formed crater, the sand fused into glassy black shards around the edges. And in the middle of it all was the source. It wasn't a ship, not in any conventional sense. It was sleek and black, made of a material that seemed to drink the light, but it was fractured and broken. Strange, rib-like structures curved around the central cockpit, making it look less like a machine and more like the carapace of some colossal, biomechanical insect. Green fluid, thick as sap, leaked from a dozen rents in its hull, sizzling as it dripped onto the hot metal. This was the source of the pulsing light, the ship's lifeblood dying. His analytical mind, the part of him that he could never turn off, kicked in despite his terror. Not terrestrial technology. The design is too organic. No visible propulsion system. The material doesn't reflect light normally. Energy source appears to be internal and biological or biointegrated. He was muttering, the familiar habit a small comfort in the face of the unknown. Then he saw the cockpit. The canopy, a single piece of what might have been crystal, was shattered. And inside, someone was slumped over the controls. Hello? Izuku called out, his voice small and shaky. Are you okay? I'm here to help. There was no response. He slid down the glassy edge of the crater, his shoes slipping on the slick surface. He approached the wounded vessel cautiously. The green light from the leaking fluid was pulsing slower now, like a fading heartbeat. He reached the cockpit and peered inside. The pilot was undeniably alien. His skin was a deep, regal purple, now pale and ashen in the dim light. He was humanoid, with a high-domed forehead and pointed ears, but his features were drawn and gaunt with pain. He was wearing a uniform, black in the center and green on the shoulders and sides, with a strange circular insignia on his chest. In the center of the insignia was a symbol, a circle with two horizontal bars through it. But Izuku's eyes were drawn to the massive, grievous wound in the alien's side. A shard of his own ship's hull had pierced through his abdomen, and the same green fluid that leaked from the ship was pooling on the floor around him. Only his was darker, mixed with a deep violet blood. This person was dying. All thoughts of fear, of aliens and spaceships, vanished, replaced by a single, desperate imperative: help him. Izuku circled the cockpit, looking for a way in. He found a section of the hull that had been bent open by the impact. Don't move! He shouted, though the alien was barely conscious. I'm coming in! He squeezed through the gap, the sharp edges of the metal tearing at his school uniform. He dropped into the cockpit, his feet splashing in the viscous fluid on the floor. The air inside was thick, smelling of alien blood and failing electronics. He knelt beside the pilot. Sir? Can you hear me? The alien's head lolled to the side. His eyes, a startlingly bright magenta, fluttered open. They were clouded with pain, but they were intelligent. They focused on Izuku, scanning him from head to toe. Child? The alien rasped, his voice a dry whisper. A trickle of violet blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "Don't talk," Izuku said, his voice taking on a frantic authority. He ripped a long strip of fabric from the bottom of his already ruined uniform shirt. "I'm going to try and apply pressure. This is going to hurt." He balled up the fabric and pressed it gently against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. The alien hissed, his body tensing, but he didn't cry out. His gaze remained fixed on Izuku's face, a look of profound, weary assessment in his eyes. "The ring chose?" The alien wheezed, his left hand twitching. Izuku looked down and saw it for the first time. On the middle finger of the alien's left hand was a ring. It was a simple, elegant band of a silver-green metal, and at its center was a setting that held the same symbol as the one on his chest. It was glowing with a faint, pulsing green light, a miniature echo of the dying ship around them. My name is Abin, sir," the alien said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength, as if fueled by sheer duty. "I am a Green Lantern. Protector of Sector 2814, Izuku stared, his mind struggling to process the words. "Green Lantern? Sector 2814? It sounded like something from a comic book. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," Abin Sir said, a faint, pained smile touching his lips. "The ring understands. Upon my imminent death, it was tasked to find a replacement, to scan this world, for an individual with the requisite qualification." His magenta eyes bored into Izuku's. "It sought out a being with the ability to overcome great fear." The words hit Izuku like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, the pressure on the wound slackening for a second. "What? And no, you've got the wrong person. It made a mistake. I'm not brave. I'm the opposite of brave. I'm quirkless, and I'm scared all the time." His voice was rising, bordering on hysterical. This had to be a hallucination, a stress-induced dream brought on by the worst day of his life. A dying alien wasn't offering him a magic space ring because he was courageous. It was absurd. "Fear is not the absence of courage," Abin Sir whispered, his voice fading again. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and more blood flecked his lips. "Courage is acting in spite of fear. The ring does not choose those who are without fear. It chooses those who can master it, who can push through it when it matters most." His gaze flickered to the side, to the tattered remains of Izuku's backpack, and the singed, waterlogged notebook sticking out of it. "You ran towards danger, unarmed, to save another. You ran towards my dying vessel, to offer aid to a stranger. You feel fear, boy, but you do not let it command you. That is a will of iron." Abin Sir's left hand, the one with the ring, began to rise. It trembled with effort, but it moved with unshakable purpose. "There is no time. The Corps needs a lantern in this sector. The Guardians must be warned." "Sinestro." He grimaced, the name spoken like a curse. "Please," Izuku begged, tears welling in his eyes again, this time for the stranger dying in front of him. "Just hold on. The heroes will be here soon. They have people with healing quirks. They can save you. My fate was sealed when my vessel was breached," Abin Sir said, his voice now impossibly serene. He finally reached Izuku. His cold, purple fingers gently took Izuku's right hand. "The ring has chosen. Do you accept the responsibility, Izuku Midoriya?" Izuku froze. How do you know my name?" "The ring knows," Abin Sir said simply. With his last ounce of strength, he slid the glowing green ring from his own finger. For a moment, it hovered in the air between them, shedding a brilliant light that filled the dark cockpit. Then, as if drawn by a magnet, it shot forward and settled onto the middle finger of Izuku's right hand. The moment the metal touched his skin, everything changed. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was a connection. A sudden, overwhelming flood of information poured into his mind: star charts, alien languages, physics he couldn't comprehend, and a single, driving imperative: willpower. The ring was a conduit, a tool, but the power came from within. A surge of energy, green and pure and unimaginably potent, erupted from the ring. It flowed up his arm and into his body, a tidal wave of power that felt like staring into the heart of a sun. The scrapes on his hands and knees from his climb over the junk vanished. the skin knitting itself back together in an instant. The exhaustion in his bones evaporated, replaced by a thrumming vitality that made him feel like he could lift the entire junkyard. And in his mind he heard a voice, clear as a bell, ancient and powerful. You have the ability to overcome great fear. At the same time, the ring on his finger flared with a blinding light. It projected a holographic image into the air in front of him, glowing, emerald green text, written in a language he shouldn't know, but suddenly could read as clearly as Japanese. It was an oath. Say the words. Abin-Sur breathed, his hand falling away, his life's last duty complete. Take the oath, become the light. Izuku stared at the glowing words, his heart pounding a frantic, terrifying rhythm. This was impossible. This was insane. But the feeling of the ring on his finger, the power coursing through his veins, was undeniable. The dying alien's words echoed in his head, you feel fear, but you do not let it command you. He was terrified. More terrified than he had ever been in his life. But Abin-Sur was dying, and his last wish was for Izuku to do this. He couldn't refuse. He couldn't let fear command him now. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes locked on the holographic text. He opened his mouth, and his voice, though trembling, filled the small space. In brightest day, a flicker of green light pulsed from the ring, in time with his heartbeat. The shadows in the cockpit deepened for a second, as if in defiance. In blackest night, the light from the ring intensified, pushing back the darkness, making it absolute. The air grew still and silent, pregnant with power. No evil shall escape my sight. His voice was stronger now, gaining conviction with each word. He felt a connection to the oath, to the billions of beings who must have spoken it before him. He was part of a chain, a legacy stretching back through eons. Let those who worship evil's might. The energy in his body surged. He could feel his own will, his stubborn, analytical, hopeful, desperate will, being drawn into the ring, amplified 1,000,000 times over, and fired back into him. He was no longer just a conduit. He and the ring were becoming a circuit. He rose to his feet, his voice no longer shaking. It boomed with a power he had never known, the voice of a hero. Beware my power, Green Lantern's light! On the final word, the ring exploded in a nova of emerald energy. It wasn't just a light, it was a physical force. A shockwave of pure willpower erupted from him, blasting outwards. The entire crashed ship groaned, and the remaining fragments of the cockpit canopy were vaporized. The green light shot into the sky, a brilliant, beautiful pillar that momentarily turned night into day, visible for miles. The wave of power washed over Izuku, not harming him, but infusing him. He felt complete. The hollow space inside him, the one carved out by years of being quirkless, was filled to bursting with this incredible, awesome power. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel weak. He felt strong. The light subsided. The pillar vanished. The world was quiet again. Izuku stood panting, his body trembling with the aftershock of the energy. He looked down at his hands. A faint, green aura shimmered around them. He was clad in a uniform, not his school clothes. It was a perfect, pristine version of the one Abin-Sur had worn, black, with green shoulders, green boots, and green gloves. And on his chest, glowing softly, was the symbol of the Green Lantern Corps. He turned back to Abin-Sur. The alien was slumped in his chair, the light gone from his magenta eyes. A peaceful, almost proud expression was settled on his face. The pulsing green glow from the ship's wounds had faded completely. The vessel and its pilot were dead. Izuku reached out a hesitant, gloved hand and gently closed the alien's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, the words feeling achingly inadequate. "I won't let you down." As he stood there in the sudden, heavy silence, a new voice spoke, seemingly from the ring itself. It was calm, female, and completely dispassionate, a stark contrast to the emotional whirlwind he just experienced. "Izuku Midoriya of Earth," the voice stated, clear and precise in his mind. "Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps." The sheer, overwhelming reality of the situation finally crashed down on him. A dying alien. A magic ring. A cosmic police force. An oath. A costume that had materialized out of thin air. It was too much. His brain, which had been running on pure adrenaline and instinct, finally short-circuited. His thoughts scattered into a million panicked fragments. I have a quirk? No, it's not a quirk. It's a ring. A weapon? A tool? All Might said I couldn't be a hero, but now, what am I? I have to tell someone. No, Albansir said to warn the Guardians, not the police. Who are the Guardians? Where are they? What was that name he said? Sinestro? What do I do now? His breathing hitched. His vision swam. He felt a desperate need for something familiar, something stable, a rock to cling to in this ocean of impossibility, and his mind, in its moment of ultimate crisis, latched on to the only symbol of stability it had ever known, All Might. He thought of his hero, of his indomitable smile, his powerful physique, his unwavering presence. He visualized him with the frantic, perfect clarity of a lifelong fan. In response, the ring on his finger glowed. A stream of green light poured from it, coalescing in the air in front of him. It shimmered and solidified, twisting itself into a perfect, miniature, three-dimensional construct. It was about a foot tall, glowing with an internal emerald light, and it was an absolutely flawless replica of All Might in his prime, right down to the two iconic bangs of hair sticking straight up. The tiny construct struck a heroic pose, its chest puffed out, its fists on its hips. Izuku stared at the little green All Might floating in the air in front of him. He stared at his gloved hands. He stared at the corpse of the alien pilot. The universe, it seemed, had a very strange, very cruel sense of humor. On the very day his dream of being a hero like All Might was pronounced dead, he was given the power to literally create him out of thin air. The paradox was too much. The emotional whiplash of the last hour, from the depths of suicidal despair to the cosmic shock of this inheritance, was more than any human mind, let alone a traumatized 14-year-old's, could handle. The little green All Might sputtered, flickered, and vanished in a wisp of light as Izuku's concentration shattered. His eyes rolled back in his head. The world dissolved into a swirling vortex of green and black, and for the second time that day, Izuku Midoriya's world ended. Or perhaps, it had just begun. Either way, he wasn't awake to see it, collapsing in a heap on the floor of the silent, alien ship, the green ring on his finger glowing with the quiet, patient power of a star. The first thing Izuku Midoriya registered was the cold. A deep, biting cold had seeped into his bones, the kind that came from lying on hard, unyielding metal for hours. His neck was a knot of screaming agony, and every muscle in his back protested as he stirred. A thin, pale light filtered through his eyelids, the gentle light of dawn. His mind, sluggish and thick as mud, offered up a single, blissful explanation. It was all a nightmare. The rooftop. The sludge villain. All Might's devastating words. The crash. The dying alien. The ring. It had to be a dream. A horrible, stress-induced hallucination brought on by the worst day of his life. Any second now, he would open his eyes and see the familiar, reassuring posters of his hero-covered bedroom ceiling. He would smell his mom cooking breakfast. He groaned, forcing his gritty eyes open. He did not see his ceiling. He saw the fractured, biomechanical interior of a crashed alien ship. He smelled the lingering, acrid sense of ozone and burnt plastic, now mingled with the salty tang of the morning sea air. And slumped in a pilot's chair a few feet away was the still, regal form of a purple-skinned alien. The nightmare was real. A strangled gasp escaped Izuku's lips. He scrambled backwards, crab-walking away from the body until his back hit the curved wall of the cockpit. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure panic. It was real. It all happened. He had a dead alien in a crashed spaceship on a public beach. He was an accomplice to something. A cosmic hit and run? Hiding evidence? He was going to go to jail for the rest of his life. He looked down at his hands, expecting to see the green and black gloves of the uniform. But they were gone. He was back in his own clothes, his singed, torn, and now thoroughly grimy middle school uniform. Everything was as it had been, except for the ring. It was still there, settled comfortably on the middle finger of his right hand. The silver-green metal seemed to gleam in the morning light, the insignia in its center dark and dormant. It felt solid. It felt real. It was a small, heavy anchor of impossibility tethering him to the events of last night. He took a shaky breath, then another. Okay, Izuku, think. Analyze the situation. Don't panic. His own advice felt hollow. He was already panicking. Problem 1, dead alien. He couldn't call the police. What would he say? Hi, yes, a dying alien gave me his super ring before he passed away in his spaceship that I found. They'd think he was a lunatic, or worse, a villain who had caused the crash. They would take the ring. They would take him. His life would be over in a different, but equally definitive, way. Problem 2, crashed alien ship. It was huge. It was smoking. It was in the middle of a junkyard, yes, but it wasn't exactly subtle. Someone was going to find it. Someone official. He was trapped. Utterly, completely trapped. His shoulders began to shake again, the terror of his new reality threatening to drown him. As if sensing his spiraling distress, the ring on his finger gave a faint, warm pulse. Your elevated heart rate and cortisol levels indicate a state of panic. The calm, female voice from last night echoed directly in his mind. It was startlingly clear, like a high-fidelity earbud planted directly in his brain. Please specify the nature of your distress. Izuku flinched, staring at the ring. Who are you? He whispered aloud. I am the ring's sentient archive and liaison, designated SAL. I am the standard issue operating system for all Green Lantern power rings. My function is to assist the wielder in their duties. Duties? Izuku squeaked. My duty right now is to not get arrested for hiding an intergalactic traffic accident. What am I supposed to do with him? And this? He gestured wildly from Abin-Sur's body to the wreckage around them. There was a moment of silence, as if SAL was processing his frantic query. Standard Green Lantern Corps protocol for a deceased lantern and their damaged vessel on a primitive, non-spacefaring world is simple. Sanitize the area to prevent technological or biological contamination. Sanitize? What does that mean? It means disposal, SAL stated, with all the emotional weight of a dictionary defining a word. The ring is capable of atomizing both organic and inorganic matter, converting it into harmless, dispersed energy. This procedure is clean, efficient, and leaves no trace. Izuku felt a wave of nausea. Atomize? They wanted him to vaporize Abin-Sur? The man who had given him this incredible power? It felt monstrous. It felt disrespectful. No, he said, his voice firm. I can't do that. It's wrong. Sentiment is understandable in new recruits, SAL replied, its tone unchanging. However, leaving the body and vessel to be discovered by your world's authorities would constitute a severe breach of the Intergalactic Secrecy Act established by the Guardians of OA. The vessel's technology could destabilize your planet's development, and the pilot's biology could introduce unknown pathogens. Sanitization is the most logical and responsible course of action. The cold logic was, infuriatingly, correct. Izuku's own analytical mind couldn't argue with it. The risks were too great. With a heavy heart and a churning stomach, he nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay, just make it quick. To initiate procedure, simply will it so. The ring will handle the technical specifications. Izuku closed his eyes. He couldn't watch. He thought of Abin-Sur's kind, pained face. I'm sorry, he thought, focusing all his will on the single, awful command. Clean it up. Make it all go away. The ring on his finger glowed intensely. There was no loud noise, no explosion. There was only a low, rising hum and a brilliant flash of green light, so bright it burned through his closed eyelids. A strange, static heat filled the air for a single second, and then, it was over. The hum faded. He opened his eyes. The body was gone. The ship was gone. The crater, the fused glass, the wreckage, all of it had vanished. He was standing on a patch of smooth, undisturbed sand, the morning waves gently lapping at the shore a few hundred feet away. The only evidence that anything had ever happened was the lingering smell of ozone and the cool, heavy weight of the ring on his finger. It was as if the last 12 hours had been erased from history. Izuku swayed on his feet, bow rising in his throat. He stumbled over to a pile of old tires and dry-heaved, his body protesting the sterile, cosmic horror of what he had just done. After the sickness passed, leaving him shaky and hollow, Izuku sat on the sand for a long time, just watching the sun climb higher in the sky. He was alone, truly alone, with a secret too immense to comprehend, let alone share. He had to learn what this ring could do. He couldn't just go back to his life. That life was over. All Might's verdict was still true. Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy, couldn't be a hero. But maybe the Green Lantern could. SL? He asked the quiet air. Acknowledged. The voice in his head replied instantly. You said I have to use my will. How? What do I do? The ring is a universal tool, limited only by the strength of your willpower and the breadth of your imagination. It converts the user's determined thought into tangible, hard light energy. To create a construct, you must visualize the object with perfect clarity and exert your will to make it manifest. Visualize. Izuku's gaze fell upon his yellow backpack, lying forgotten on the sand where he dropped it last night. His notebook was still sticking out. He thought of all the years he'd spent drawing, writing, analyzing. Visualization was something he did every single day. Okay, he said, taking a breath. Let's try something simple. He held out his left hand, palm up. He needed to think of something he knew intimately. Something basic. He closed his eyes and pictured a pencil. Not just any pencil, but the specific brand he always used. His muttering started before he even realized it, a low, rapid stream of consciousness that had been his constant companion for years. Okay, a simple number 2 pencil, hexagonal body to prevent rolling, painted yellow, HB graphite core, approximately 7.5 inches long. The wood is cedar, easy to sharpen. At the end, a pink eraser, made of synthetic rubber, held in place by a brass ferrule, the small metal band. As he muttered, a faint green wisp of light appeared above his palm. It was shaky, translucent, barely there. Focus your will, wielder, Asael instructed. Do not merely describe. Believe in its existence. Izuku gritted his teeth. He squeezed his eyes shut tighter, pouring all his concentration into the image in his mind. He didn't just picture the pencil. He pictured the feel of it in his hand, the smell of the shaved wood, the faint scratching sound it made on paper. He willed it to be real. The wisp of light solidified. It brightened, coalescing into a solid, glowing green shape. When he opened his eyes, a perfect, translucent green pencil was floating an inch above his palm. It was flawless, right down to the brand name stamped on the side and the tiny metallic glint of the ferrule. He reached out his other hand and tentatively poked it. It was solid. It felt like cool, smooth glass. A giddy, disbelieving laugh bubbled up out of him. I did it, he breathed. I actually did it. The pencil flickered and vanished as his concentration broke. But it didn't matter. He'd done it once. He could do it again. 1,000 possibilities bloomed in his mind, his analytical brain going into overdrive. The complexity of the constructs, the potential applications for rescue, for containment, for defense. What else can it do? He asked eagerly. The ring provides a suite of standard abilities. It generates a protective aura, translates nearly all languages, grants access to the Book of OA's archives, and allows for faster-than-light travel through space. It also allows the wielder to manipulate the fundamental force of gravity to achieve flight. Izuku's eyes went wide. Flight? The word was a holy grail. For a boy who had spent his life grounded, watching heroes soar through the sky, it was the ultimate dream. You mean? I can fly? Affirmative. The principle is similar to creating a construct. You must will the ring to negate the gravitational pull on your person and apply motive force in your desired direction. This, Izuku thought, was going to be even better than the pencil. He stood up, his heart thrumming with excitement. Okay. Fly. He braced himself. Nothing happened. Up? Still nothing. He tried focusing his will, imagining himself lifting off the ground. A faint green aura flickered around his feet, and he felt a strange, weightless sensation, but he remained firmly on the sand. Your instructions are too vague, Asael said, a hint of what might have been digital impatience in its tone. The ring is not a magic wand. It is a complex scientific instrument. You must provide clear parameters. Will the ring to generate a focused field of antigravitons around your center of mass. Antigravitons? Izuku muttered, his mind racing. So it's not just magic, it's manipulating fundamental particles. Does that mean it adheres to the laws of thermodynamics? What's the energy source? Is it drawing from my own bioenergy or an external source? The emotional spectrum, right? But how is emotion converted into usable energy? Is there an intermediary catalyst? And how does... Wielder, you are overthinking, Asael interrupted. The ring handles the conversion. You need only provide the will. Visualize yourself rising. Izuku took a deep breath. He shut his mouth, silencing his muttering analysis for once. He looked up at the blue sky. He imagined the feeling of the wind in his hair, the world shrinking beneath him. He focused that desire, that pure, childish yearning to fly, and pushed it into the ring. Up, he thought, with every fiber of his being. Just up. He didn't lift gently. He shot upwards like a champagne cork. Whoa! He yelped as the ground fell away with terrifying speed. He flailed his arms wildly, his stomach lurching into his throat. He went up 10 feet, 20, 50, 100. The junkyard became a patchwork quilt of rust and decay below him. Okay, stop! Stop! He panicked. His upward momentum ceased so abruptly that he tumbled forward in the air, spinning end over end. The world became a dizzying blur of blue sky and brown beach. Directional stability requires constant focus, Asael noted calmly. You think? Izuku shouted at his own hand. He tried to right himself, kicking his legs like he was swimming. It only made him spin faster. He was a human pinwheel, 150 feet in the air. He had to get this under control. He remembered how heroes flew on TV. They were always so steady, so graceful. He thought of All Might, streaking through the sky like a comet. He forced himself to stop flailing and stretched his body out, arms forward, legs straight. The classic Superman pose. His spinning slowed. He wobbled violently for a second, then, miraculously, found a center of balance. He was hovering. Floating. He was actually, truly flying. A slow, wondrous grin spread across his face. He was shaky, his arms trembling from the effort of holding the pose, but he was doing it. He tilted his hands down slightly, willing himself forward. He drifted slowly, moving over the piles of junk with a wobbly, uncertain grace. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his gut reminding him of the long, hard fall that awaited his first mistake. But for the first time, it was overshadowed by something else. A pure, unadulterated joy. He let out a loud, whooping laugh that echoed across the deserted beach. He was flying. The next few days were a blur of secrecy, exhaustion, and exhilarating discovery. By day, Izuku was a ghost. He went through the motions of his life, but his mind was elsewhere. He sat through his classes, the teacher's words washing over him. He avoided Kaken, whose glares seemed to carry a new, more confused kind of venom since the sludge villain incident. At home, he was even more withdrawn. His mother, Inko, noticed immediately. Izuku, honey? Are you feeling okay? She'd asked the first night, her brow furrowed with her customary worry. You've barely touched your Katsudon. I'm fine, Mom. He'd lied, forcing a smile. Just tired. A lot happened yesterday. It was the understatement of the millennium. The guilt was a constant, bitter taste in his mouth. He hated lying to her, but how could he possibly tell her the truth? He was sneaking out every single night, waiting until he heard the soft snores from her bedroom before slipping out his window and making the long walk to the one place he could practice in secret, the Dagoba junkyard. The beach became his sanctuary and his classroom. Sal was a patient, if brutally honest, teacher. His first few nights were a comedy of errors. His flight was still clumsy. More than once, he misjudged his speed and ended up in a heap of rusted metal, saved only by the ring's automatic protective aura that shimmered into existence a second before impact. His construct making, however, was where he truly began to shine. He learned that his muttering wasn't a distraction, it was his greatest asset. It was how he focused, how he built the complex mental blueprints the ring needed. He started small, recreating his school supplies, his All Might figurines, his mother's kitchen utensils. But he quickly grew more ambitious. One night, he tried to create a working clock. He sat cross-legged on a pile of discarded tires, muttering to himself under the moonlight. The mainspring provides the power, coiling and uncoiling, driving the gear train. The escape wheel and the pallet fork work in tandem. The escapement, that's the key. It controls the release of energy, creating the ticking. Each gear has to be precise, the teeth interlocking perfectly. A glowing green clock materialized in front of him. It was a beautiful, skeletal thing, all its inner workings visible and moving. And it was keeping perfect time. He moved on to more complex things from his notebooks. He created a perfect, to-scale construct of Endeavor's costume, analyzing the function of the cooling pipes. He built a working model of a miniature jet engine, the green energy swirling inside it to simulate combustion. He made a detailed, three-dimensional anatomical model of a human hand, complete with bones, muscles, and ligaments, all glowing with their own shade of green. Your constructs exhibit an unprecedented level of detail for a new recruit, Sal commented one night, after he'd spent an hour building a construct of a television that could actually display a fuzzy, green-tinted image of the public broadcast news. Your mind's ability to process and retain complex structural information is highly anomalous. It's just a hobby, Izuku mumbled, flushing with a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. He also discovered his default construct. It happened when a stray cat, spooked by his glowing, flying form, let out a piercing yowl from a nearby pile of trash. Startled, Izuku lost his concentration. The intricate construct of a bicycle he'd been working on vanished, and in its place, a massive, 10-foot-tall, translucent green head appeared in the air. It was his mother's face, captured in a perfect expression of frantic worry, her brows knitted together, her lower lip trembling. Izuku stared at it mortified. "Oh, come on!" he groaned, burying his face in his hands. The giant head of his worried mom flickered and disappeared. Emergency defense constructs are often reflections of the wielder's subconscious priorities or deepest anxieties, Asale offered, its voice as dry as ever. "Great," Izuku muttered. "So my ultimate defense is crippling maternal guilt." Despite the embarrassing hiccups, he was improving. His flight became steadier, faster. He learned to hover without thinking, to bank and turn with a subtle shift of his weight. The feeling of soaring through the night sky, the city lights a glittering carpet below, was intoxicating. It was a freedom he had never dreamed possible. For the first time, he felt powerful. He felt like a hero. But he knew practicing in a junkyard wasn't enough. A hero had to act. The opportunity came a week after he got the ring. He was flying home, keeping low to the rooftops, the city lights of Muzidafu sprawling out before him. He was feeling confident, maybe even a little cocky. He just successfully created and sustained a flock of a dozen intricate, flapping green birds that followed him in perfect formation. Then he heard it. A woman's scream, sharp and terrified, cutting through the low hum of the city. It came from a narrow shopping street a few blocks away. Izuku's blood went cold. His flock of birds vanished as his concentration snapped. All his practice, all his secret training, this was the moment of truth. This was no drill. His heart hammered in his chest, a familiar, sickening rhythm of fear. You're not a hero. You're a liability. Be realistic. All Might's voice echoed in his head, but another voice, Aben Sur's, answered it. Courage is acting in spite of fear. He took a deep breath, the air cold and sharp in his lungs. He pushed down the panic and shot forward, a silent green streak against the dark sky. He hovered above the street, hidden by the shadows of the rooftops. Down below, a woman was on the ground, her groceries scattered around her. A man in a hoodie was sprinting away, her purse clutched in his hand. He was laughing, a cruel, mocking sound. "Help! Somebody, he has my purse!" the woman cried. The man had a quirk. His fingers seemed to stretch and become unnaturally sticky, allowing him to scale a wall with spider-like speed. A low-level villain, but a villain nonetheless. Izuku's mind raced, his muttering kicking into high gear. Okay, plan? Need to stop him without hurting him. A direct confrontation is risky. He could have another quirk. Containment is the best option. A cage? No, too aggressive. A net? Maybe. A bubble. Yes, a simple containment bubble. Spherical, durable, soft interior to cushion impact. He dove. He shot down from the rooftops, a blur of green. Hey! He yelled, his voice cracking with adrenaline. Stop that! You're, under citizen's arrest! The thief looked up, his eyes widening in shock at the sight of a glowing, flying teenager rocketing towards him. What the hell? Izuka held out his hand, focusing his will. Bubble! Big, strong, soft bubble. His execution was messy. In his panic, he misjudged the scale. The construct that erupted from his ring wasn't a neat, person-sized bubble. It was a massive, wobbly sphere the size of a small bus. It shot forward, and instead of just enveloping the thief, it scooped him up along with 2 overflowing trash cans, a bicycle chained to a rack, and the lamppost the bike was chained to, ripping it clean out of the concrete with a horrible screech of metal. Whoa, too big! Too big! Izuki yelped, trying to control the massive, junk-filled bubble. He wobbled in the air, nearly crashing into the side of a building as he struggled to manage the weight and momentum of his own creation. The bubble bounced once, jarringly, before he finally managed to bring it to a hovering stop 10 feet off the ground. Inside, the thief was tangled up with a heap of garbage and a twisted bicycle, looking more confused than scared. Izuka let out a shaky breath, his arms trembling. It was clumsy. It was chaotic. But it worked. He gently lowered the bubble to the ground, where the lamppost clattered onto the pavement. He let the top half of the sphere dissipate, leaving the thief sitting in a glowing green bowl, effectively trapped. He then created a small, simple green hand, which zipped over to the dazed thief, plucked the purse from his grasp, and flew it back to the stunned woman. She took it, her hands shaking. She looked from the purse to the floating, glowing boy, her mouth agape. Thank you? She stammered. Who? What are you? Just, a new hero, Izuka said, trying to sound confident. The words felt strange and wonderful on his tongue. He gave her a shaky thumbs up, and before anyone else could show up, he shot back up into the night sky and disappeared. He'd done it. He had saved someone. He had been a hero. The elation was so pure, so potent, it felt like his heart would burst. He was so lost in his triumph that he didn't notice the 2 sets of eyes that had watched the entire exchange from the shadows. Katsuki Bakugo was in a foul mood. He was always in a foul mood lately. Ever since that damn sludge villain, the world felt off-kilter. The fawning praise from the pro-heroes had been nice, but it was tainted by the memory of his own helplessness, of suffocating, of his explosions being useless. And worse, it was tainted by the memory of Deku. He kicked a stray can, sending it clattering down the street. That damn nerd. That quirkless, useless, pathetic pebble who had somehow, impossibly, been the one to move when everyone else was frozen. The memory of Deku's terrified, tear-streaked face running towards him filled Bakugo with a complex, boiling rage he couldn't even put a name to. It was a mixture of humiliation, fury, and a deeply unsettling confusion. He was walking home from the arcade, his knuckles sore from pounding the buttons on a fighting game, when he heard the scream. His head snapped up, his hero instincts, genuine and sharp, instantly on alert. He saw the purse snatcher, the woman on the ground. He was about to act, his palms already starting to crackle with small explosions, when a streak of green light shot down from the sky. Bakugo froze, hiding in the mouth of an alley. He watched, his red eyes wide with disbelief, as a figure cloaked in green light descended. He watched as the figure shouted in a voice that was familiar, annoyingly familiar. He watched as the figure created a ridiculously oversized green bubble, causing chaos, but ultimately stopping the villain. And then, the figure hovered in the light of a street lamp for a moment, giving a shaky thumbs up. The world stopped. The face, illuminated by the green glow of his own power. The wild, untamable green-black hair. The familiar, anxious posture, even when floating in midair. It was Deku. It was impossible. It was a joke. It was a violation of the fundamental laws of the universe as Katsuki Bakugo understood them. Deku was quirkless. A zero. A bug to be squashed under his shoe. He wasn't supposed to have a quirk. He especially wasn't supposed to have that. Flying. Creating things out of thin air. It was one of the most powerful, most versatile quirks Bakugo had ever seen. It was the kind of quirk a number one hero would have. And it belonged to Deku. An animalistic growl rumbled deep in Bakugo's chest. 1,000 questions, all of them laced with poison, flooded his mind. Was he hiding it, all this time? All those years of pretending to be a pathetic, quirkless loser? Was he laughing at me? Looking down on me? The thought was so galling, so utterly offensive, that his hands began to smoke. The world didn't just feel off-kilter anymore. It felt like it had been turned upside down and shaken until all the pieces were in the wrong place. The clear, simple hierarchy he had always known, with himself at the very top and Deku at the absolute bottom, had been shattered. He watched as Deku rocketed back into the sky. He wasn't impressed by the power. He was enraged by the deception. What? Bakugo seethed, his voice a low, dangerous whisper that was lost in the night air. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white, the heat from his palms scorching the air. What the hell? Is that damn nerd's quirk? Further down the street, leaning against a darkened storefront, a skeletal figure watched the same scene unfold with a very different kind of intensity. Toshinori Yagi, in his diminished form, had been on a quiet walk, his mind heavy with the events of the past week. He had crushed a young boy's dream, and the memory of the light dying in Midoriya's eyes haunted him. He had seen the flash of green from blocks away. It wasn't the fiery signature of endeavor or the bright flare of a new hero debuting. It was a deep, verdant, and fundamentally alien energy. It pulsed with a power that didn't feel biological. It wasn't a quirk. He knew quirks. He had been studying them, fighting them, for decades. This was something else entirely. He watched the clumsy but effective intervention. The oversized bubble, the near crash, the earnest, if awkward, declaration of a citizen's arrest. It was the work of a rookie, powerful but untrained, and then he saw the boy's face. Toshinori's hollow eyes widened. Midoriya, the boy from the rooftop. The quirkless boy. The boy he had told, unequivocally, to give up. And here he was, wielding a power unlike anything Toshinori had ever seen, acting on the same reckless, heroic impulse that had sent him running at the sludge villain. A complex storm of emotions brewed within him. Concern was paramount. Where did a quirkless child get a power like that? Was it a villain's gift? A dangerous support item? The power was immense, cosmic even. In the hands of an untrained, emotional teenager, it was a catastrophe waiting to happen. But beneath the concern, there was something else. A flicker of intrigue. A sliver of guilt. And a deep, undeniable spark of admiration. He had told the boy he couldn't be a hero. And the boy, in defiance of all logic and reason, was proving him wrong. He hadn't just found a way. He had found a power that dwarfed most pro-heroes' quirks. Toshinori watched the green light disappear into the night, a new star in the Musadafus sky. The heroic heart he had recognized in the boy was still beating, now armed with a truly formidable power. The world had just gotten infinitely more complicated. He pushed himself off the wall, a thoughtful, worried expression on his gaunt face as he began the walk home. Interesting. All Might murmured to himself, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 questions. Very interesting indeed, young Midoriya. The week following his first, clumsy act of heroism was one of quiet, gnawing anxiety for Izuku Midoriya. He felt like a walking contradiction. By day, he was the same quirkless, invisible Deku, finishing his last few days of middle school under the oppressive weight of everyone's low expectations. He filled notebook pages with theories, not about heroes, but about his own impossible power. The energy output seems directly proportional to emotional clarity and intensity, he muttered to himself one night, hunched over a fresh notebook in his bedroom. The All Might posters on his walls seemed to watch him with a new, unknowable judgment. Simple constructs are easy, but complex ones require deep focus. Is there a limit? A refractory period? Sal says the power is my own will, but the ring is the converter. So if the ring is damaged, does the power fail? What are its material properties? Is it susceptible to certain energy frequencies? What if a villain had a quirk that could disrupt? His frantic muttering was cut short. The ring on his finger, which had been dormant, suddenly flashed with a brilliant green light. Mandatory training for Sector 2814's new recruit is now required. Sal's voice announced in his mind, crisp and utterly devoid of preamble. Cease all terrestrial activities. Prepare for immediate translocation. Izuku's blood ran cold. Wait, translocation? Mandatory? Now? I can't just. I have school tomorrow. My mom will. Transporting to Oi in 3, 2. Wait, Oi? What's Oi? SL, abort. Abort! He shouted, waving his hand frantically as if he could shake the voice out of his head. 1. The world dissolved. It wasn't a pleasant sensation. There was no gentle fade to black. One moment he was in his bedroom, surrounded by the comforting clutter of his childhood. The next, he was nothing. He was thought without form, a consciousness stretched thin across an impossible dimension. A sickening, violent lurch, like the universe's worst roller coaster drop, pulled him apart atom by atom. He was a streak of light in a tunnel of screaming, kaleidoscopic colors. Emerald green, blood red, wrathful orange, and terrifying, sickly yellow all swirled around him, a vortex of raw emotion made manifest. He felt the cold vacuum of space, the heat of 1,000 dying suns, and the silent, crushing pressure of a black hole all in the same microsecond. He couldn't breathe because he didn't have lungs. He couldn't scream because he didn't have a mouth. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. He was reassembled with a jolt that felt like being born and struck by lightning simultaneously. He found himself standing on solid ground, his stomach churning, his legs threatening to buckle. He gasped, taking in a lungful of air that was clean and crisp, with a strange, metallic tang, like the air after a thunderstorm. When his vision cleared, his jaw dropped. He was no longer in his bedroom. He wasn't even on Earth. He stood on a vast, circular platform of glowing, emerald-green crystal. Below him, stretching out to a horizon that seemed impossibly far away, was a city. But it was a city built by gods or mathematicians. Crystalline towers, glowing from within with a soft green light, pierced the sky, their architecture a breathtaking fusion of organic curves and perfect geometric angles. Highways of pure light, filled with streaking green figures, crisscrossed the air between the spires. The sky above was not blue, but a deep, perpetual twilight of indigo and violet, dotted with 3 pale, silver moons of varying sizes. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, was the green lantern symbol. It was etched into the towers, it formed the shape of the platforms, it glowed on the chests of the thousands of beings flying, walking, and congregating around him. He was surrounded by aliens, beings of every conceivable shape and size. A towering creature made of what looked like living rock was in a heated debate with a small, furry being with 6 arms. A trio of insectoids with iridescent carapaces chittered to each other, their multifaceted eyes scanning the area. A glowing, sentient cloud of blue gas was contained within a sleek, black suit, its head a swirling vortex of light. There were beings with tentacles, beings with wings, beings that were little more than a floating, disembodied brain in a jar. And all of them, from the smallest to the largest, wore the same black and green uniform. All of them had a ring. Izuku felt a profound, crushing sense of insignificance. He was a speck of dust in a cosmic metropolis. He was a 14-year-old human boy from a backwater planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. He was so far from home. He was gawking, his head swiveling back and forth, trying to take it all in, when a shadow fell over him. It was a very, very large shadow. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," a voice boomed. It was a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together, a voice that could command armies and probably had. "Fresh meat. And a scrawny piece at that." Izuku tilted his head back. And back. And back. The being looming over him was massive, at least 9 feet tall and nearly as wide. He was a monstrous, hulking figure, with pinkish red skin, a face that resembled a particularly angry boar, and massive, tusk-like teeth jutting from his lower jaw. He had the same green and black uniform, though it strained to contain his colossal, muscular frame. The ring on his thick fingers seemed small by comparison. His eyes, small and surprisingly intelligent, scanned Izuku from head to toe, and his expression was one of pure, undiluted disappointment. Izuku's analytical mind, his last defense against sheer terror, kicked in. Bipedal, humanoid but with significant porcine and rhinoceroid features. Extreme muscle density. The pressure he's exerting on the crystalline floor suggests a body mass of at least 600 kilograms. The way he holds himself, military. A drill instructor? What are you mumbling about, Shiny? The giant bellowed, leaning down so his face was just inches from Izuku's. Izuku could smell his breath. It smelled like burnt toast and sulfur. Cat got your tongue? Or did the trip through the tubes scramble that soft little primate brain of yours? I am Izuku and Midoriya, sir. He stammered, shrinking under the intense glare. I know who you are, Midoriya of Earth, Sector 2814. The giant grunted, straightening up. Abin Sir's replacement. I'm Kilowog, head trainer for the Green Lantern Corps, and that means for the next rotation, your worthless hide belongs to me. You got that? Why yes, sir, Mr. Kilowog, sir! Kilowog let out a short, barking laugh. He's polite. That's a new one. He gestured with a thumb the size of a brick towards a massive structure in the distance, a sort of brutalist-style coliseum. Training grounds are that away. Don't dawdle. The other new recruits are already warming up. And they're not gonna go easy on you just 'cause you're small enough to fit in my lunchbox. He turned to leave, then paused. Abin Sur was one of the best. A legend. He saw something in you. Right now, I don't see anything but a shaking leaf in a hurricane. You're gonna have to prove to me, and more importantly to yourself, that the ring didn't make a mistake. He fixed Izuku with one last, hard stare. Don't you dare dishonor his memory, you miserable little puzzer. Now move! The word, puzzer, echoed in Izuku's ears as Kilowog stomped away, his footsteps making the crystalline platform vibrate. Izuku stood frozen for a second, the alien insults, the overwhelming environment, and the crushing weight of expectation all crashing down on him. He was a replacement for a legend. He was a puzzer. With a deep, trembling breath, he started walking, a tiny, terrified human in a city of gods and monsters. The training grounds were less a gym and more a high-tech torture chamber designed by a sadist. The air hummed with energy. Recruits were everywhere, practicing in designated zones. A four-armed, lizard-like lantern was juggling constructs of massive boulders. A slender, plant-based being was weaving an intricate cage of glowing green thorns. Izuku was unceremoniously shoved into a training paddock with a dozen other recruits. They were a motley crew of aliens, all of them looking tougher, more confident, and infinitely more ready for this than he was. All right, greenhorns! Kilowog's voice boomed from an observation tower above them. First drill is simple. Basic combat constructs. Pair up. Last one standing gets extra rations. Losers get to clean the power battery. Now fight. Before Izuku could even process the command, a massive, insected creature with a thick, chitinous exoskeleton and razor-sharp mandibles turned to him. It let out a series of aggressive clicks and pointed one of its four scythe-like arms at him. Nice to meet you, Izuku offered weakly. The insectoid lantern responded by creating a giant, brutal-looking green mace and charging. Panic seized Izuku. He threw his hands up, and his mind raced. Okay, defense. A shield. But what kind? A simple wall is boring. It needs to be effective, reinforced. Like a castle wall, with crenellations for archers, and buttresses for support, and maybe a portcullis design. As he muttered his design, a section of a glowing green castle wall materialized in front of him. It was beautifully detailed, with individual stone blocks and arrow slits. The insectoid's mace smashed right through it like it was made of sugar glass. The attack shattered Izuku's concentration and his shield. The force of the blow, though blunted, sent him flying backwards. He landed hard, the ring's passive aura fizzing around him, absorbing most of the impact but leaving him breathless and stunned. What in the name of the Guardians was that, Midoriya? Kilowog roared from his perch. An art project? He's trying to smash you, not admire your architecture. Fight back, you puzzer! The insectoid was on him again. Izuku scrambled to his feet. Okay, not defense. Offense. A weapon! But a sword is too simple. I need something to restrain him. A capture device. like the ones Pro Hero Eraserhead uses, but stronger. A high-tensile alloy binding. He thrust his hand forward, and a complex series of green chains and manacles shot out. But they were too slow, too intricate. The insectoid simply sidestepped them and swatted him with the flat of a newly formed green blade, sending him tumbling again. This went on for what felt like an eternity. Every time Izuku tried to create something complex and clever, his opponents, brutal, efficient, and single-minded, would just overwhelm him with something simple and direct. A giant hammer. A battering ram. A simple, thick wall. His elaborate, detailed constructs were taking too long to form, his concentration split between design and execution. He was trying to play chess while everyone else was playing checkers and just flipping the board over. He was the first one eliminated. From every single combat drill, he spent the rest of the training cycle on the floor, watching in humiliation as the other recruits battered each other with raw, unrefined power. His body ached, but his pride ached more. Kilowog had been right. He was a shaking leaf. At the end of the session, covered in psychic bruises, he had to join the other losers in cleaning the central power battery. It was a monument of unimaginable scale, a cathedral of green energy that served as the heart of OA. Cleaning it involved scrubbing away cosmic dust with small, focused energy buffers from the ring. It was tedious, humbling work. "You think too much, Earthboy." Izuku looked up. It was one of the other recruits, a tall, feline-looking creature with blue fur and discerning yellow eyes. She was polishing a section of the battery with an effortless grace. "You try to build a starship when all you need is a rock," she said, her voice a low purr. "Combat isn't about being clever. It's about being fast. Hit them with the biggest, dumbest thing you can think of before they hit you. Save the fancy stuff for later." She finished her section and gave him a nod. "The name's Rami. From the planet Papiliox. Try not to get yourself killed tomorrow." She then bounded away, leaving Izuku alone with his thoughts and a very large, very dirty power battery. The biggest, dumbest thing, Izuku thought. He looked at his hand, at the ring. He tried to imagine it, tried to form a giant, simple green fist like the others had. But his mind rebelled. It wasn't him. It wasn't how he thought. He wasn't a hammer. He was something else. And if he couldn't be a hammer, maybe he wasn't a lantern at all. The next training cycle was different. Kilowog, seeming to take some small pity on the battered human, had moved on from pure combat. Today's exercise was the gauntlet. It was a massive, floating obstacle course designed to test the lantern's versatility. "The rules are simple, puzzers," Kilowog bellowed. "Get from the start to the finish. The course will test your flight, your problem-solving, and your ability to not die. Go!" A klaxon blared, and the recruits shot off the starting platform. Izuku, lagging behind, took a deep breath and followed. The first section was an asteroid field. Not real asteroids, but massive, tumbling constructs of rock programmed to move in chaotic, unpredictable patterns. The other recruits were simply blasting their way through, smashing the rocks into green gravel. It was fast, but it was messy. Izuku watched them for a second, his analytical mind taking over. It wasn't about power. It was a physics problem. He began to mutter. "Okay, chaotic orbital mechanics, but there are patterns, gaps in the field. If I adjust my velocity and vector in response to the nearest objects, I can plot a path through. It's a fluid dynamics equation." He didn't smash anything. He flew. He weaved and dodged, his small frame and precise control over his flight, honed by his clumsy practice sessions at Dagobah, allowing him to slip through gaps the larger, more aggressive lanterns couldn't. He became a green blur, dancing through the chaos. He emerged from the asteroid field among the first group, much to the surprise of the insectoid who had beaten him so soundly the day before. The next challenge was a collapsing structure. A construct of a massive, multi-story building was programmed to fall apart, and dozens of glowing, civilian, dummies were trapped inside. The goal was rescue. The brutish recruits charged in, creating giant hands to scoop up the dummies, but their clumsy efforts often brought down more of the structure, crushing other dummies. Izuku stopped at the edge of the building, his eyes scanning the structure. "Structural integrity is failing at key load-bearing points," If I can just reinforce them temporarily. And I need to get them out fast, but gently. Not a hand. A slide. Or a platform. No, a system of platforms. He flew in, not grabbing, but building. With rapid, precise movements, he created a series of glowing green support beams, shoring up a collapsing ceiling just long enough to work. Then, he wove a complex, beautiful construct, a network of interlocking slides, like a fire escape from a futuristic amusement park. It gently spiraled down from the top floors, collecting the dummies from multiple rooms at once and depositing them safely on the ground. It was elegant, efficient, and saved more dummies than anyone else's attempt. From his observation tower, Kilowog watched, leaning forward. He didn't say anything, but the corner of his mouth twitched. The final challenge was a massive chasm, miles wide, with the finish line on the other side. The air in the chasm was filled with disruptive energy that made flight unstable. The obvious solution was to just power through it, a brute force flight against the turbulence. Izuku watched as the other recruits struggled, their flight paths wobbly and erratic. He knew he couldn't match them in raw power. He needed a different solution. He looked at the chasm, at the two cliffs. A bridge, not just a plank, he muttered, his eyes glowing with concentration. It needs to be a proper suspension bridge, with towers and main suspension cables and vertical suspender ropes to hold the deck. The load has to be distributed perfectly across the entire structure to withstand the energy currents. He set to work. While others were struggling through the air, he became a one-man construction crew. Two massive green towers rose from the cliffs. Glowing cables, thick as tree trunks, stretched between them. A whole latticework of smaller cables and supports followed, and then a solid, stable road deck materialized, spanning the entire chasm. It was a breathtakingly complex and beautiful construct, a perfect piece of engineering brought to life by sheer will. He finished, panting from the effort, and then simply flew across his own bridge in a smooth, easy glide, landing on the finish line. He hadn't come in first. The direct, brute force method was still faster, but as the other recruits finally limped across the finish line, they all stared in awe at the massive, glowing green bridge that now spanned the chasm. Kilowog floated down from his tower, landing with a heavy thud in front of Izuku. Izuku braced himself for another tirade. That bridge! Kilowog grunted, pointing a thick finger at the construct. Your design? Why yes, sir, Izuku stammered. I based it on the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge in Japan, but I reinforced the truss system to account for the energy waves. Kilowog held up a hand, silencing him. He looked from the bridge to Izuku, his expression unreadable. You're a terrible fighter, Midoriya. Maybe the worst I've ever seen. You'd be useless in a brawl. Izuku's heart sank. But, Kilowog continued, a new, grudging respect in his voice. I've never seen a rookie make a construct that complex. That stable. That smart. The ring isn't just a hammer. It's a toolbox. And you seem to have the whole damn instruction manual memorized. He clapped a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder, making his knees buckle. You did good, Puzzer. Real good. It was the highest praise Izuku had ever received. A wide, exhausted, but triumphant grin spread across his face. The final part of his training was not physical, but mental. He was led by Kilowog to a different part of Oe, a grand, silent library where the shelves were made of light and the books were holographic projections. This is the lecture hall, Kilowog said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Every lantern needs to know what they're fighting for, and what they're fighting against. Pay attention. This is the important part. The lecture was given by a lantern named Tomari, a slender, bird-like being with a calm, scholarly demeanor. He used his ring to project a massive, holographic model of the universe in the center of the room. The power you wield, Tomari began, his voice melodic, is that of will. Green light. It is the center of what we call the emotional spectrum. The model shifted. 7 colors blazed to life in a line. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Each color corresponds to an emotion, a driving force in the universe. Tomari explained. Red is rage. Orange is avarice. Blue is hope. Indigo is compassion. Violet is love. And at the furthest end of the spectrum, the polar opposite of will, is yellow. The light of fear. A chill went down Izuku's spine. He remembered the feeling of terror at the USJ incident in his own timeline that wasn't the raw power of fear. The outline had mentioned this, but hearing it, seeing it laid out, was different. For eons, the Green Lantern Corps was the sole keeper of the peace. But the universe is not so simple. Other corps have risen, wielding these other lights, but none are more dangerous, more antithetical to our mission, than those who wield the yellow light. The hologram zoomed in on the yellow symbol, a different, more menacing insignia. The Sinestro Corps, the name. Abin-Sur had said it with his dying breath. Tomari gestured, and a new figure appeared in the hologram. It was a lantern, tall and proud, with pinkish skin and a sharp, intelligent face. He looked noble. He looked like a hero. He wore the green and black uniform. This was Thale Sinestro, Tomari said, his voice tinged with sadness. He was a citizen of the planet Korrigar. And he was, for a very long time, considered to be the greatest of all Green Lanterns. Izuku stared. This was the villain? He looked like All Might, confident, powerful, a symbol. Sinestro was obsessed with order. He believed that the only true way to maintain peace was through control. He used his ring to instill not just order, but fear on his own home world, turning it into a silent, perfect dictatorship. When his crimes were discovered by Abin-Sur, he was put on trial and exiled by the Guardians. The holographic figure of Sinestro was stripped of his uniform, his ring taken away. But in his exile he found a new power. Or rather, he forged one. Believing that fear was a more effective tool for order than willpower, he created a yellow power ring, and with it, his own core. The figure of Sinestro was now clad in a yellow and black uniform, his face twisted into a sneer. He was surrounded by other nightmarish figures, all glowing with a sickly yellow light. The Sinestro Corps preys on the fearful. Their power grows in the presence of terror. They do not seek to stop crime, they seek to rule through it. They are the darkness that answers our light, and Sinestro himself is a brilliant, ruthless strategist who knows all of our strengths and all of our weaknesses. The hologram shifted one last time, focusing on a small blue-green planet in a spiral galaxy. Sector 2814. Earth. Sinestro has recently taken an interest in your world, Izuku Midoriya, Tomari said, his bird-like eyes fixing on Izuku. A planet with a burgeoning population of superpowered individuals, and a single, powerful figure, your All Might, who enforces order through willpower and inspiration. To Sinestro, a world like Earth is an ideological insult. It is a beacon of hope that he desperately wants to extinguish, to prove that his philosophy of fear is superior. Abin-Sur was investigating Sinestro's movements in your sector when his ship was sabotaged, and he crashed. The pieces clicked together in Izuku's mind. Abin-Sur wasn't just in an accident. He was murdered. And the man who did it was now looking at his home. The Guardians believe that Sinestro will make a move on Earth soon. Tomari concluded, his voice grave. You are not just a replacement, New Lantern. You are your world's first and last line of defense against the cosmic tyrant. Your training is over, but your war is just beginning. You must be ready. The hologram faded, leaving Izuku standing in the silent library, the weight of 1,000 worlds on his shoulders. He wasn't just a hero in training anymore. He was a soldier on the front lines of a war he never knew existed, tasked with protecting his entire planet from a fallen hero who wielded fear itself as a weapon. Before he could even fully process the terrifying revelation, the ring on his finger flashed again. Mandatory training cycle complete, Sal's voice announced. Returning wielder to point of origin. Wait, already? But I have so many more questions. About the other colors, about the Guardians, about... He didn't get to finish. The world dissolved around him again, the same sickening, wrenching sensation as before. The kaleidoscopic tunnel of light swirled, and then, with a jolt, he was back. He stumbled forward, catching himself on his desk. He was in his bedroom. It was still dark outside. He looked at his alarm clock. 12:05 a.m. The entire trip, the flight across the universe, the days of grueling training, the history lesson of the cosmos, had taken less than 5 minutes of Earth time. He was still in his Green Lantern uniform. It felt different now. Heavier. Not a costume, but a soldier's fatigues. He looked at his desk, at the UA high school application form he'd been staring at before he was summoned. His dream of being a hero, of getting into UA, had once seemed like the biggest, most important thing in the universe. Now, it felt so small. But it wasn't unimportant. UA wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a training ground. All Might wasn't just an idol. He was an asset to be protected. His classmates weren't just rivals. They were civilians. He picked up the pen. His hand was steady. His fear was still there, a cold knot of dread in his stomach, but it was a familiar companion now. He knew its name. And he knew his duty was to stand against it. With a new, quiet, and terrifyingly heavy resolve, he began to fill out the form. His war had begun, and the UA entrance exam was just the first battle. The transition back was just as jarring, just as violent. One moment, Izuku stood in the silent, hallowed halls of the ON archives, the weight of a coming galactic war settling on his soul. The next, he was stumbling forward, his hands hitting the cool wood of his own desk, the familiar scent of old paper and dust filling his lungs. His alarm clock blinked 12:05 a.m. 5 minutes, an entire boot camp, a lifetime of cosmic knowledge, a declaration of war, all crammed into 5 terrestrial minutes. He stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, the phantom sensation of interdimensional travel still buzzing under his skin. He was still in the uniform. The sleek black and vibrant green felt less like a costume now and more like a soldier's fatigues, imbued with a purpose far heavier than he had ever imagined. His gaze fell upon the UA high school application form on his desk, its neat lines and hopeful questions looking impossibly quaint, a relic from a different lifetime. His dream. To walk those halls, to learn from the best, to become a hero like All Might. It had been the sun his entire life orbited. Now, it felt like a single, small moon in a galaxy filled with terrifying, burning stars. The threat of Sinestro, the duty to Sector 2814, the legacy of Albin Sur, these were celestial bodies of immense gravity, pulling his destiny in a new direction. But the dream wasn't dead. It had just changed. Matured. UA was no longer just a goal. It was a strategic necessity. He couldn't protect Earth as a nameless, faceless alien cop. He didn't know the first thing about being a public hero on this planet. How did one handle the media? The laws governing quirk usage? The intricate dance of public perception and heroic duty? All Might had spent a lifetime mastering it. Izuku had spent a lifetime studying it from the outside. If he was going to be the planet's shield against the cosmic horrors All Might couldn't punch, he needed to learn to stand beside him in the light. He needed to be a hero, not just a lantern. UA was the only place to learn that. His hand, steady and resolute, picked up the pen. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in his gut. The fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, the fear of Sinestro. But his training on OA had taught him something vital. Fear was a constant. It was the background radiation of the universe. The trick wasn't to eliminate it, but to build something in spite of it. With a deep breath, he began to fill out the form, his neat, precise handwriting a small act of defiance against the overwhelming chaos of his new reality. The next 10 months were a strange, bifurcated existence. His nights belonged to the Green Lantern Corps. He would patrol the silent skies of Muzurifu, a phantom of green light keeping watch. He practiced relentlessly, his constructs growing more complex, his flight more intuitive. He used the ring's access to the Book of OA's archives to study, not just alien histories, but physics, engineering, and medicine, his brain soaking up information like a sponge. He was a student of the universe. His days, however, belonged to Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy preparing for the impossible. He trained his body with a fervor he never had before, following All Might's old American dream plan that he'd found online years ago. He cleaned the Dagobah beach not just as training, but as a quiet tribute to the two men who had set him on this path. All Might, who had inspired the dream, and Albin Sur, who had given him the means to achieve it. He was no longer just a fanba. He was a soldier preparing his body for a war he couldn't tell anyone about. His mother, Inko, watched the transformation with a mixture of pride and profound worry. Her perpetually anxious son was changing. The frantic, hero-obsessed muttering at the dinner table was replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. He still analyzed, but it was softer, more internal. He was stronger, his shoulders broader, his gaze more direct. He looked less like the fragile boy she was always afraid of breaking and more like a young man being forged into something hard and unyielding. "Izuku," she said one morning, a few days before the exam, as she placed a bowl of rice in front of him. "You've been working so hard. I'm so proud of you. But are you okay? You seem so far away sometimes." Izuku looked up from his breakfast, the lie a familiar weight on his tongue. "I'm okay, Mom. Just focused. The UA exam is everything. I have to give it my all." He was giving it his all. But the exam was only the beginning. On the morning of the UA High Entrance exam, Izuku stood before the towering gates of the school, a sea of nervous, excited teenagers flowing around him. They chattered loudly, showing off their quirks, fingers that sparked, skin that hardened, eyes that glowed. Each of them was a unique expression of power, a biological miracle. And then there was him, an anomaly. A boy with a borrowed, cosmic power hidden in plain sight. He felt a familiar pang of otherness, but it was different now. It wasn't the bitter isolation of the quirkless. It was the quiet solitude of a sentry on a wall, watching a party he could never truly join. "Out of my way, Deku," the voice, harsh and contemptuous, cut through his thoughts. Katsuki Bakugo shoved past him, not even bothering to look at him. But Izuku felt the heat of his glare, a simmering cauldron of rage and confusion that had been steadily boiling for the past 10 months. Bakugo had undoubtedly heard rumors of the mysterious Green Light vigilante who had been performing small, neat, and perplexingly efficient rescues around the city. He didn't know for sure it was Izuku, but the suspicion was a poison in his system. The universe had been turned upside down, and he was convinced Deku was the one who had done it. Izuku watched him go, a flicker of his old fear surfacing, only to be replaced by a quiet resolve. Kaken was just another variable now, another piece on a board that had grown infinitely larger. He took a step forward, ready to enter, and his foot caught on an uneven paving stone. He pitched forward, a clumsy, all too familiar lurch towards gravity's embrace. For a split second, old instincts flared, the shame, the embarrassment of being the clumsy one. But new instincts were faster. Without a conscious thought, he willed it. A tiny, almost invisible construct, no bigger than a coin, materialized under the toe of his shoe, a hard light nudge that righted his balance before he could fall. It was gone in an instant. "Whoa, you okay?" a cheerful voice asked. He turned to see a girl with a round, friendly face and a permanent blush on her cheeks. She had been reaching out to stop his fall with her hand, her fingers outstretched. "Oh. Yeah? I'm fine," Izuku said, a bit flustered. "Thanks for, trying to catch me. It's a bad omen to fall right before the big test, right?" "Super nervous," she said, bouncing on her toes. "I'm Ochiko Uraraka." "Good luck in there, Izuku Midoriya." "You too," he replied, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. She radiated a bright, earnest energy that felt like a tiny pocket of sunshine. As she hurried into the building, he felt a strange, pleasant warmth. It was nice to be seen as just another nervous examinee. The written exam was a formality. Questions that would have once required his full, frantic concentration were now simple. The ring's passive information streams had broadened his understanding of mathematics, physics, and language in ways he was still discovering. He finished with time to spare, his mind calm and clear. The real test began in the orientation auditorium. The lights dimmed, and the voice hero, Present Mike, exploded onto the stage. "Hello, everybody! Welcome to today's live performance! Can I get a hey?" The auditorium was met with dead silence. Izuku felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment for the hero, a nostalgic echo of his fanboy days. But he wasn't a fanboy anymore. He listened with focused intensity as Present Mike explained the practical exam. 3 types of robots, worth 1, 2, or 3 points respectively. The goal was to score as many points as possible by immobilizing them. Izuku's mind was already running calculations. Immobilizing, not necessarily destroying. The point system rewards aggression, but there might be another way. Brute force is inefficient. Kilowog's training. You're not a fighter, Midoriya. You're an engineer. So, let's engineer a solution. And excuse me. A loud, sharp voice cut through President Mick's presentation. A tall, broad-shouldered boy with glasses and dark blue hair stood up, chopping the air with his hand. On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains, not 3. If this is a misprint, it is a great shame for a top-tier institution like UA High. Furthermore, you, with the messy green hair, Izuku froze as a spotlight seemed to find him. You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting and unbecoming for a potential hero. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave. A wave of snickers rippled through the auditorium. The old Izuku would have combusted from sheer humiliation. He would have stammered, apologized profusely, and probably shrunk so low in his seat he'd have disappeared. The new Izuku simply blinked, his train of thought interrupted. He looked at the boy Tenya Ida, from the famous Ida hero family, he recognized, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. My apologies, he said, his voice quiet but clear. He then turned his attention back to the stage, his mind already discarding the interruption. He had a problem to solve. Public opinion could wait. President Mike explained the 4th robot, the zero-pointer, was an obstacle to be avoided. A gimmick. Izuku filed the information away. An obstacle. Not a target. A test of threat assessment and evasion. As they were herded towards the massive gates of their designated battle center, Izuku felt the familiar thrum of pre-combat adrenaline. But it was a cold, controlled fire now, not the panicked blaze of before. He stretched, feeling the energy coursing through him. The other examinees were a bundle of nerves and kinetic energy, their quirks flaring. He saw Uraraka nearby, taking deep, calming breaths. He saw Ida, doing precise leg stretches. He saw Bakugo, a feral grin on his face, small explosions crackling in his palms. Izuku closed his eyes. He ignored the noise, the tension, the world. He reached inward, to the core of his will, and silently recited the words that had become his mantra, his focus, his prayer. In brightest day, in blackest night, the ring on his finger pulsed with a faint, warm light, hidden by his glove. No evil shall escape my sight. He felt the connection solidify, his mind becoming a razor-sharp conduit for the emerald energy. Let those who worship evil's might. He opened his eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by an absolute, diamond-hard clarity. Beware my power. Green Lantern's light. And go! President Mick's voice screamed from a loudspeaker. The other examinees stood in confused silence. What? There's no countdown in a real fight. But Izuku was already moving. He didn't run. He bent his knees, pushed his will into the ring, and shot forward in a low, silent, ground-skimming flight. A green streak of light. He was through the gates and into the artificial city before anyone else had even taken a step. Well, it looks like one of them gets it. Follow that kid! He zipped down the main street, his eyes scanning everything. The city was a perfect replica, detailed and sprawling. And then he saw them. A trio of one-pointers rolled out from an alleyway. They were squat, heavily armored robots on a single wheel, their red optical sensors locking onto him. The other students, now pouring into the city behind him, would have blasted them. Bakugo would have blown them to smithereens. Izuku saw a different path. His mind flashed back to the schematics for basic robotics he'd studied in the own archives. He flew towards them, muttering under his breath. Okay. Single-axle propulsion, low center of gravity, power source likely in the central chassis, but accessing it is inefficient. The weak point is the balancing mechanism. A simple gyroscope. He held out his hand. He didn't create a fist or a hammer. He created a set of impossibly detailed, glowing green tools, a Phillips head screwdriver, a wrench, and a pair of fine-tipped pliers. The constructs, humming with energy, shot forward. With the speed of a hummingbird, the screwdriver unscrewed a vital access panel, the pliers snipped a single power conduit to the gyroscopic stabilizer, and the wrench gave a single, sharp twist to a locking nut on the main wheel. The one-pointer wobbled, sparked, and then clattered onto its side, twitching and immobilized. He repeated the process on the other two in less than 3 seconds. It was surgical. It was silent. It was beautiful. 3 points. He didn't stop to admire his work. He was already flying deeper into the city. A 2-pointer, larger and more menacing with missile pods on its shoulders, trundled around the corner. Containment, not destruction, he thought. He pictured a cage, then dismissed it as too crude. He needed something better, something more, him. A puzzle box. Interlocking parts, impossible to solve from the inside. He flew above the robot and thrust his palm downwards. A complex latticework of glowing green panels shot from his ring, assembling around the 2-pointer with a series of satisfying clicks. In a second, the robot was encased in an intricate, glowing green cube covered in what looked like ancient geometric patterns. The robot fired its missiles, which exploded harmlessly against the inside of the energy construct. 2 points. Total 5. A roar from behind him signaled Bakugo's arrival. A massive explosion obliterated a 1-pointer Izuku had been about to disable. Bakugo landed, a wild look in his eyes, and spotted Izuku hovering. "Deku!" he screamed, his voice raw with fury. "So you finally show your damn quirk? Hiding it all this time, you bastard? You think you're better than me?" He launched himself at Izuku, his explosions propelling him through the air. Izuku, with a sigh, simply willed himself upwards, effortlessly dodging the attack. Bakugo flew past, roaring in frustration, and immediately redirected his rage at a group of nearby robots. Izuku ignored him. This wasn't the time. He had a mission. He spent the next few minutes as a whirlwind of efficient, creative problem-solving. He didn't earn points, he collected them. He trapped a 3-pointer in a giant, intricate construct of a ship in a bottle. He lifted 2 1-pointers with a green crane construct and deposited them gently in a dumpster. He disassembled a 2-pointer mid-stride, its parts falling to the ground in a neat, orderly pile. He was also keeping an eye out for the other examinees. He saw a boy with purple balls for hair about to be cornered and created a quick, spring-loaded platform construct under his feet, bouncing him to safety on a nearby rooftop. He saw a girl with earphone jacks about to be hit by debris and erected a simple, transparent green shield to protect her. He wasn't getting points for it, but the ring's protective aura was a constant, low-level drain. Creating constructs for others was a conscious choice. Abin Sur had chosen him for his will to save others. He wouldn't betray that. In the darkened observation room, a bank of monitors showed every angle of the various battle centers. The teachers of Yui watched with professional detachment, making notes, but all eyes in the room kept drifting back to Monitor 7, the feed from Battle Center B. "Whoa, check out the kid with the explosions!" President Mike yelled, pointing at a screen showing Bakugo annihilating a swarm of robots. "He's a real powerhouse! Racking up the villain points like a madman. He's impressive." A woman with dark hair and a rather revealing costume mused. "But his technique is unsubtle. A lot of collateral damage, but that's not the interesting one," a tiny, chipper voice said. All heads turned to Principal Nizu, the small, white, mammal-like creature with a scar over his eye, who was sipping tea and staring intently at a different part of the screen. "That one." He pointed a furry paw at a green streak zipping across the city. The camera zoomed in on Izuku as he neatly encased a 3-pointer in a construct that looked like a giant, elaborate birdcage. "What is that quirk?" Midnight asked, leaning forward. "It seems to be a form of energy manipulation, but he's also flying, and demonstrating some kind of telekinesis. It's like 3 quirks in one." "That's because it's not a quirk." The voice was flat, tired, and utterly certain. Shoto Aizawa, wrapped in his scarf and looking like he'd just woken up, hadn't taken his eyes off Izuku's monitor. "What do you mean, Aizawa?" All Might asked from the back of the room, his voice carefully neutral. He was in his skeletal form, watching the boy he had told to be realistic defy reality itself. "Every quirk, no matter how esoteric, has a biological marker. A source. The quirk gene expresses itself physically," Aizawa explained, his eyes narrowed. "The energy this boy is wielding, it has no such signature. Our scanners are picking up massive energy readings, but they're not biological. They're coming from an external source. Look at his right hand, he's wearing a ring." The energy originates from it. It's some kind of high-level support item. A support item with that kind of power output? It would be illegal for an examinee to use, another teacher pointed out. Perhaps, Nisa said, his black eyes twinkling with delighted curiosity. Or perhaps we are witnessing something entirely new. A paradigm shift. How exhilarating! All Might remained silent, a small, proud smile on his thin lips. He's not just using the power, he's controlling it, he thought. He's thinking like a hero. Not just about winning, but about how he wins. 6 minutes left. President Mick's voice boomed. On the screen, Izuku was still moving. He had a respectable, if not chart-topping, number of points. But then, he did something that made the entire room fall silent. He had just trapped a robot when he spotted Uraraka nearby. She was looking pale, fighting off a wave of nausea from overusing her zero-gravity quirk. She was being targeted by 2 3-pointers. Without hesitation, Izuku flew over. He didn't destroy the robots. He created a massive, solid green wall between them and Uraraka, then created a comfortable-looking green armchair behind her. You should sit down. His voice, picked up by the drone's mic, said calmly. You've reached your quirk's limit. It's dangerous to push it. He then turned and disabled the 2 robots with ruthless efficiency. He just gave up points to help a rival, Midnight said, her voice filled with surprise. Aizawa's tired expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, interest, perhaps, danced in his eyes. All Might's smile widened. There it is, he thought. That's the heart of a hero. You can't teach that. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A low, grinding roar echoed through the city, growing louder and louder. A shadow fell over the entire street. From behind a skyscraper, the 0-pointer rose. It was a titan. A monster of green and black metal that towered over the tallest buildings. Its massive arms could crush entire city blocks. Its single, glowing red eye scanned the battlefield with cold, mechanical malice. The effect was instantaneous. Panic. It's the 0-pointer! Someone screamed. Run! We can't fight that thing. The other examinees, who had been fighting with such bravado moments before, turned and fled in a desperate, screaming tide. Ida, despite his earlier confidence, was among them, shouting about tactical retreats. Bakugo, after a brief, furious glare at the behemoth, grit his teeth and started blasting a path away from it. It was worth 0 points. It was an obstacle. The smart move, the only move, was to run. Izuku was about to do the same. His training, his analysis, everything told him to evade. But then he heard a small, pained cry. Ow! He whipped around. The 0-pointer, in its lumbering advance, had smashed a building, and a shower of concrete and steel had rained down. Lying trapped under a massive slab of debris was Ochiko Uraraka. Her leg was caught, and she was looking up at the approaching monster with wide, terrified eyes. The world went silent. Everything narrowed down to that single image, a person in need, a monster approaching. His mind was a maelstrom. All Might's words, be realistic. Kilowog's words, you're a terrible fighter. Sal's voice. Threat level exceeds wielder's proven combat capabilities. Evasion is the logical course of action. But then, he remembered Abin Sur's dying words. The ring chose a being with the ability to overcome great fear. He looked at the terrified girl, then at the advancing robot. This wasn't a test of points anymore. This was the test. He shot into the air, a defiant spark of green against the towering darkness of the robot. In the observation room, the mood was electric. The boy's not running, Aizawa stated, leaning forward for the first time. What is he doing? Midnight whispered. He can't possibly fight that thing. All Might gripped the railing in front of him, his knuckles white. Show them, my boy, he willed. Show them what a true hero does. Izuku flew straight towards the 0-pointer's head, his mind a blur of frantic, brilliant calculation. I can't destroy it. The energy required would be catastrophic. One for All could smash it with a single punch, but the ring is different. It's not a fist. It's a scalpel. It's a lever. It's a toolbox. And every big machine has a weakness. It's too big. Too heavy. Its own weight is its greatest enemy. He remembered his bridge construct. He remembered the laws of physics he had devoured from the own library. He had an idea. It was insane. It was theatrical. It was perfect. SAL, I need maximum structural integrity. Focus on tensile strength. He yelled to his ring. Acknowledged. Executing wielder's design. He reached the robot's head, a gnat before a god. He didn't try to punch it. He flew around it, a streak of green light, and the ring began to pour out energy. Massive, glowing green chains, thicker than his body, erupted from his ring. They weren't simple chains. They were modeled after the capture weapons of a famous industrial hero, designed to restrain rampaging machinery. He wrapped them around the zero-pointer's massive ankles, its knees, its hips. He's trying to tie it up. President Mike screeched. That's crazy! But Izuku wasn't just tying it. At key points on the chains, he was creating complex, spinning constructs, massive green winches and pulley systems. He flew to a point between the robot's legs and created a colossal anchor construct, driving it deep into the artificial street. He took a deep breath, hovering in front of the robot's impassive red eye. Okay, he muttered. Let's see if classical mechanics still works on you. He clenched his fist, and with a surge of will, he commanded the constructs. The winches roared to life with a low hum of pure energy. The chains, anchored to the ground, began to tighten with immense force. They pulled the robot's legs in opposite directions, forcing its stance wider and wider, throwing its center of gravity into chaos. The zero-pointer, for the first time, seemed to react. It tried to take a step, but its legs were being pulled apart. It stumbled, its massive frame groaning in protest. It's not enough! Izuku grit his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. The strain on his will was immense. The ring on his finger was screaming, pouring out energy. He needed one final push. As the robot teetered on the brink, its massive right foot lifting from the ground in a desperate attempt to regain balance, Izuku acted. He shot down to the ground in front of it. With the last of his immediate reserves, he created one final, simple, brutally effective construct. A giant, solid green wedge. He drove it right into the space where the robot's foot was about to land. The zero-pointer's foot came down on the angled surface of the wedge. Its ankle twisted with a horrible, grinding shriek of protesting metal. Its balance, already compromised, was completely shattered. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, the colossus hung in the air, its arms flailing, and then, with the slow, majestic finality of a falling mountain, it crashed. It fell backwards, away from Uraraka, its massive body slamming into a skyscraper and collapsing into a heap of steaming, ruined metal. Silence. The entire battlefield was silent. The examinees who had been fleeing had stopped, their faces a mixture of terror and utter, dumbfounded awe. In the observation room, no one spoke. Niza had dropped his teacup. Aizawa's jaw was slack. All Might was openly grinning, a look of pure, unadulterated pride on his face. Izuku, however, wasn't finished. He dropped to the ground next to Uraraka, his body trembling, his flight sputtering out. The ring on his finger was dim, its light faint. Are you okay? He panted. My leg. She winced. He looked at the slab of concrete pinning her. He placed his hand on it. He didn't try to lift it. His will was too frayed for a heavy telekinetic lift. Instead, he focused. He pictured the concrete not as a solid, but as a collection of particles. Disassemble. He whispered. A soft green light enveloped the slab. It didn't explode. It just dissolved. It broke down into a soft, harmless pile of gravel and dust, freeing her leg. Time's you up! President Mick's voice, shaky for the first time, echoed across the silent city. Izuku's adrenaline finally gave out. The world swam in his vision, and he collapsed onto his knees, utterly spent. The last thing he saw before the world went hazy was the kind face of Recovery Girl leaning over him, and the awestruck face of Ochiko Uraraka staring at him as if he were a god. The acceptance letter came a week later. Izuku, convinced he had failed because he had earned so few villain points, opened it with a trembling hand. A small metal disc fell out, and a hologram of All Might flared to life. I am here! As a projection! All Might boomed. He went on to explain the scoring, the hidden system. You can't be a hero with just smashing villains, young man. A true hero saves others, and that's why we have rescue points. The screen behind All Might lit up. Achiko Uraraka, 45 rescue points. Tenya Ida, 52 rescue points. And Izuku Midoriya. All Might paused for dramatic effect. Villain points, 22. Not a great score. However, your actions in saving other examinees, in protecting them from harm, and in immobilizing the arena-sized obstacle to save another, have earned you an unprecedented 80 rescue points. A new Yuri record. Izuku's eyes filled with tears. Your power is a strange one, young Midoriya, All Might said, his tone softening. But your heart is undeniably heroic. You did not just pass. You embodied the spirit of this academy. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. This is your hero academia. On his first day, stepping into the hallowed classroom of 1A, Izuku felt a sense of surreal accomplishment. He saw Uraraka, Ida, and Bakugo, who shot him a glare so intense it could have melted steel. But before he could even find his seat, a tired voice called his name. Midoriya. A word. Shota Aizawa was standing by the door, his eyes bloodshot, his expression grim. He led Izuku into the empty hallway. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa, he said, his voice low. Let's get something straight. I watched your exam. I read the analysis from our support gear department and our quirk counselors. What you use is not a quirk. There are no biological markers, no energy readings from your body. It all originates from that ring. He stared at Izuku, his gaze piercing. Our school has rules against unauthorized support gear in the exam, especially gear of that power level. Normally, you'd be disqualified and possibly facing legal charges. However, Principal Nisa finds you fascinating, and All Might vouch for you. So you're here. But I'm watching you. I don't trust powers without a source, and I don't trust secrets. So I'm going to ask you once. What is that ring? Izuku's heart pounded. He had anticipated this. He had practiced his answer. He met Aizawa's gaze, his own eyes clear and steady. He gave the truth, just not the whole truth. It's a power I was given, sir, he said, his voice quiet but firm. By someone who believed I could do good with it. I know I have a lot to learn. But I promise you, I'm not a threat, and I'm here to prove I'm worthy of it. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, searching his face for any hint of deception. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. That's a nice sentiment, Aizawa finally said, his voice dripping with skepticism. But sentiment doesn't stop villains. Results do. Don't disappoint me. Just as he was about to turn away, a booming voice echoed down the hall. Now, Aizawa! Don't scare the boy on his first day. All Might, in his massive hero form, rounded the corner, a giant smile plastered on his face. He placed a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. I'm keeping a special eye on this one. He's got potential, he announced Aizawa, though his eyes, directed at Izuku, held a deeper, more significant meaning. Aizawa just grunted, giving Izuku one last suspicious glare before stalking back into the classroom. That was close, All Might said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he deflated back into his skeletal form, hiding in the shadow of the doorway. Aizawa is the sharpest mind at UA when it comes to quirks. Your secret won't stay one for long if you're not careful. I know, All Might, Izuku said, his shoulders slumping in relief. Thank you? Don't thank me yet, my boy, Tashinori said, his expression serious. Your performance at the exam was incredible. You saved that girl. You were a true hero, but a power that great, appearing from nowhere, it attracts attention. Not just from teachers like Aizawa. He looked Izuku in the eye, his gaze filled with a new kind of mentorship, not of a predecessor, but of an ally. It attracts the attention of villains too. You've put a target on your back. Your time as a student here won't be easy. You need to learn, and you need to learn fast. Izuku nodded, his gaze hardening with resolve. He looked into the classroom at his new classmates, then back at the symbol of peace. His journey at UA had begun, but it wasn't just about learning to be a hero anymore. It was about learning to survive.